After record turnout in 2020, Republican-controlled states appear to be in a race to the bottom when it comes to passing egregious barriers to voting. So Iowa, for instance, just passed a law that will significantly curtail voting rights in the state. For instance, Governor Kim Reynolds has just signed legislation cutting the state's early voting period and closing the polls an hour earlier on election day. The law cuts Iowa's early voting period from 29 days to 20 days. Polls will now close at 8 p.m. for state and federal elections instead of 9 p.m. It's like, it's the most transparent thing ever. There's no reasoning for it. They don't even try, Woz, to like pretend like they're doing this for election integrity. They're just cutting voting days. They cut 9 voting days off of the amount of time. Like, that's insane. And of course, they cut an hour from each day, from 9 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's just so obvious.
And they don't. And the reason why they have cover is because of things like hate radio, because of things like Fox News, which have demonized the other side so effectively. It's the sense that we don't have to play fair because the Democrats are so evil. We have to do everything at all costs to keep them out of office. But I feel heartened by the fact that these efforts have had the opposite effect, in the sense that they've brought so much awareness to the chicanery that goes on in these local Republican parties, right? Like these local governments as it pertains to voting. And people have been galvanized by it and said, you know what? I'm gonna vote despite you because of what you're doing. We saw record turnouts, which I think did have a lot to do with the mail-in votes and the early ballots and all of that stuff. But I have the utmost confidence in the people on the ground, the people around there, to get out the vote, because this is so cynical and so evil, quite frankly, so undemocratic, so anti-American, that I think these efforts often have the opposite effect. People get riled up. People do what they have to do to get themselves ready to vote. And again, they don't suffer. They do suffer in an ironic way, in the sense that so many Republican voters actually take advantage of all these things. Like, there's no way to guarantee that every Republican's gonna get to the poll before 8 p.m. There's no way to guarantee that Republicans don't use mail-in. Like, it's so stupid. Like, I think a lot of what we saw last election is Republicans didn't mail in their votes because they got told not to. So I just don't think this is gonna work in their favor ultimately.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I mean, it is pretty sweet to see how much Trump's false narratives about mail-in ballots ended up hurting him more than anyone else. But there is more from what's happening in Iowa. There's more in the law. For instance, it significantly tightens the rules for when absentee ballots must be received by county auditors in order to be counted. Ballots must now arrive by the time polls close in order to be counted. The law also limits who can return a voter's absentee ballot. Only a voter or an immediate family member, household member, or caregiver may return the ballot to the auditor's office or place it in the mail. The law allows counties to establish just one ballot drop box at the auditor's office under video surveillance. Like, it's just total overkill and it's absolutely ridiculous. Previously, ballots were placed in the mail the day before election day, and they'd still be counted as long as they arrived by noon the following Monday. And previously, anyone with the voter designated to drop off the ballot would be able to do so. Obviously, they're scaling that back. And I do want to move over to Georgia, because Georgia is where people were certainly galvanized in the 2020 election, which is why the state turned blue. And the Republican lawmakers in that state are not having it. So there is currently a piece of legislation that's going through the process. It just passed in the Senate, but it's going to go to the state House. It's known as SB 241, and here's what's in it. Legislators approved a bill repealing no excuse absentee voting, which 1.3 million voters used to cast ballots in the mail in 2020, including 450,000 Republicans. So to your point, Woz, Republican voters could actually be hurt by this as well. They also voted to end automatic voter registration, which 5 million of the state's 7.6 voters used to register since it was implemented in 2016. They don't want a lot of people, out there voting. And one of the easiest ways to get people registered is just to register them automatically if they're eligible to vote. They want to limit that. They want to make sure that they make it as difficult, difficult and complicated to vote as possible to kind of discourage people from doing it.
Yeah, it's obvious that they are not the party of ideas. This is not the party that wants to sway people on account of how great the ideas are that will eventually lead to greater lives for them. For them, it's just about getting the right amount of people riled up around issues that have nothing to do with their material well-beings and ride that wave of emotion, of fear, of anger into power, and ultimately increasing the sort of wealth gap and shoveling as much of our money back up to the top and make sure that we get to live as paupers for the rest of our days. And this is just, this is par for the course. You never see them come out and defend this in any substantive way. It's always about, this voter fraud and, people are voting twice and this and that. And, they're busting people down from Harlem. They're doing all of this craziness. It's always nonsense. They can never do anything on the merits. And, unfortunately, this is just the GOP. This is what it is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And don't think that the Georgia House doesn't have its own legislation. And it's so brazen, Woz. Like one of the things that they're trying to do is cut weekend voting days to basically prevent what's known as souls to the polls, get out the vote drives that happen in black churches. Like it's just so obvious. It's so brazen. Right. Like they don't
as if black people are just too stupid to hold those souls for votes on a Wednesday. Like we can just change the day, big dog. I mean, give me a break.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.